Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, Cooking for the Family. I'm Devon, and today I'm going to share with you how I make my Chile Verde. I also have my homemade Spanish rice and homemade flour tortillas to go with it. And let me tell you, when my husband has a plate of this, he knows 30 years ago he married the right woman. And I'm going to share with you how I do it. You ready? Let's get started. Now these are tomatillos. They're different than green tomatoes. So these are not green tomatoes. These are tomatillos. And then they have this husk on them. And so in the store, you're going to find them in the produce section, and you want to take this husk off. And so I've gone on and I've taken the husk off of my other ones that I have there. Now when you take the husk off of your tomatillos, they're going to be a little bit tacky. You're going to feel this tackiness on them, and so you want to make sure that you rinse them very well in cold water. So rinse them really good in cold water. Now this recipe is enough. I'm making a big pot, so this is enough actually for 8 people, but I'm going to share with you how to reduce it down if you're just going to cook for like 1 or 2 people and you want dinner and maybe leftovers for lunch or dinner the next day. Now in my bowl here, I also have some white potatoes. You can use either white potatoes or you can use Yukon gold potatoes. And then here I have my pork stew meat. Now in the description box below, I will share a list of all the ingredients that I'm using to make this recipe. And at the end of the video, stay tuned. I'll give you a visual and show you all of the ingredients that I used. So for my pork stew meat, you want to have about 2.5 to 3 pounds of pork stew meat. And then on my pork stew meat, I've gone on and I've rinsed it really good. I put it in my bowl and now I'm adding my seasoning. And I'm using coarse kosher salt, and that was 2 teaspoons of coarse kosher salt. And now I'm going to be using some coarse black pepper, and this is 1/4 of a teaspoon of coarse black pepper. And with my potatoes that I'm using, the potatoes was 1.5 pounds of potatoes, but I will have that information in the description box, as a reference. But if you're kind of watching along and taking notes, that was 1.5 pounds. So once of the potatoes. So once I have my seasoning, which was the 2 teaspoons of the coarse kosher salt and 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, I'm just going to use my tongs here and mix the seasoning around on my pork stew meat, just like that. So now that I have my seasonings all nice and mixed, we're going to go ahead and start first on charring our vegetables that we're going to be using. This is 1/2 of a white onion that I'm charring, and I also have 4 garlic cloves. So those are 4 medium-sized garlic cloves. And with my tomatillos, I'm also going to put them on my comal here. If you have a cast iron skillet, you want to definitely use that. If you don't have a flat comal, which is also cast iron, another way to do this is also in the oven. So you can go ahead, put your oven on 375. You want to line your cookie sheet with some foil and then put your vegetables on that, put it in the oven and let them char and get nice and soft. So they're going to get nice and soft, and that's what we want to do. So while they're getting soft and they're charring up a bit, I'm going to sear off my pork stew meat. And so this pot that I'm using, it's a 6.5 quart pot. So this is a 6.5 quart pot, and in the pot I put just a couple of tablespoons of vegetable oil. And so I'm going to sear my meat in 2 batches on each side. Now I learned this recipe from my sister-in-laws. I mentioned before in one of my other videos that my husband was raised up with 5 sisters. And my 5 sister-in-laws are all excellent cooks cooking wonderful, authentic Mexican dishes. And so this is something that I learned from them and being in their kitchen. My husband's favorite, which is Chile Verde. So now that while my meat is searing, I go ahead and I flip my tomatillos. I'm flipping also my garlic. And my garlic, I did take the skin off of my garlic. Okay, so I did take the skin off my garlic. You can leave the skin on your garlic if you want to and then take the skin off later. But I went on and removed the garlic skin prior to charring. And it only takes about 5 minutes for the garlic to char up. So that comes off first, and I'm putting it inside my blender. Now with my tomatillos, as you see, they're starting to char, getting a beautiful char on them. I'm flipping them, and they're also getting soft. And so we just want to char them. They're going to get a little soft, not totally soft, but they're going to get a little soft, and that's what we're going to be looking for. And I'm going to be doing my tomatillos. I'm going to be charring them in 2 batches. For my tomatillos, this is 3 pounds that I'm going to be using total. My pork stew meat is starting to go ahead and also get a little brown on the side. This is also going to build up some fond in the bottom of my pot, which is going to be some wonderful flavor. And when I put my pork stew meat in my pot, I'm mindful I don't want to put all of my pork stew meat in at one time. That's because I do want to have just that little bit of that char on there. And if I put all my stew meat in at one time, then it would steam more so than brown. And we do want to get that nice little browning effect on there and get some of that nice fond, because that fond is flavor and it is going to flavor our chili verde so nicely. And when it comes to making chili verde, there's definitely different variations here and there. But the basics of the tomatillos, the seasonings that we're going to be using, the pork stew meat, the garlic and onion are the basics of a good chili verde. So while this second batch, I'm going to go ahead and let this second batch sear. And if you were making this for just 1 to 2 people, instead of using the 2.5 to 3 pounds of pork stew meat, you would want to reduce that to a pound and a half at the most for about 1 to 2 people. That is going to give you plenty enough meat for your dinner and leftovers the next day if you want another dinner or another lunch. And then likewise with our tomatillos, they're getting nice and soft. They'll even get a tiny bit yellow. So you see the char, they'll get a little yellow and they'll start to feel also soft. With the tomatillos, I'm having 3 pounds. I'm using 3 pounds. You want to go ahead and also reduce that down to about a pound to a pound and a half of the tomatillos. And then with the onion, this is a half of a medium white onion that's nice and charred. So I'm taking the onion off and I'm putting that in my blender. With the onion, you want to use about 1/4 to 1/3 of a white onion. So just about 1/4 to 1/3 of a white onion. And likewise with the garlic, you're just going to need about 1 to 2 cloves of garlic. So as my tomatillos are getting softer and they're getting nice and charred, I'm starting to take those off my comal. Now, I know I'm sharing a lot of the small details, but definitely this is how I learned how to make it from being around my sister-in-laws and being in their kitchen, because these little details make all the difference when it comes to the meal coming out right, the recipe coming out right. And that's where I feel the love comes into the dish, when you're taking your time to make the dish, making the dish right, the recipe right, and then someone has and they go, ooh, you made this with love, because you took that little extra effort and it made all the difference. And with my tongues and with your tongues, you want to be using 2 separate tongues, one for your meat and one as you're charring your vegetables. We're going to taste it beforehand and we're going to taste it once it kind of cooks down. And we don't want to kind of cross-contaminate. You don't want to do that. So be sure that you're using 1 tongue for your meat and 1 tongue that you're using for the tomatillos. So again, in my blender here, I'm blending the tomatillos, the onion, and the garlic. So I'm blending those together. I'm going to also blend my second batch, because my 3 pounds of the tomatillos won't all fit in the blender at the same time, so I do blend them in 2 batches. So now that my meat, I've seared all of the meat, I add that back to my pot. I'm adding in my potatoes now, and my tomatillos that I blended the first batch, we're going to add that also to the pot. And I'm going to also start to lift that fond off the bottom of the pot. In my blender, I have the rest of the tomatillos, and I also put some hatch chilies. Those were some charred hatch chilies from a hatch chili roasting event that I went to. Now, if you don't have hatch chilies, that was 4 medium hatch chilies, you can also use Anaheim Chiles. And I'll explain more to you about the Anaheim Chiles in just a bit. So also in my blender, I put 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. And this here is some cilantro. This is a handful of cilantro, which is about 1/3 of a cup of cilantro leaves as well as the sprigs. I'm going to go ahead and blend this. So this is the balance of my tomatillos that are charred. This is my 4 hatch chilies. Now hatch chilies, these are medium heat hatch chilies because my Chile Verde is going to be a medium heat. Anaheim chilies, you find those in the grocery store. You would char those on your comal just like we did the tomatillos, or either you can put them in the oven and char them like that on a cookie sheet with the other vegetables until they just get that nice brown char. You want to definitely remove the seeds and the inside vein so that way that nice mild flavor of the Anaheim chilies will shine through and it's not going to be too spicy. And lastly, with the chilies, you can also get the can of chilies, and it'll say on there Diced Green Chiles. They come in different heat levels from mild up to hot. So that was oregano that I just put in, and that was 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. This is ground cumin, and I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of ground cumin. Now, if you're enjoying this video and appreciate me sharing the recipe with you, be sure to show it some love and give this video a thumbs up. Now, once I have my 1 teaspoon of oregano, my 2 teaspoons of ground cumin, I go ahead, I'm going to mix this and blend it till it's nice and dissolved and mixed in to our pot. Then we're going to put our top on our pot and we're going to I turn my heat up to high, bring it up to a nice rolling boil. When it comes to a nice rolling boil, then I go ahead and I reduce it down to a medium-high heat, and we're going to let this continue to stew and simmer until our potatoes are tender and our meat is nice and soft and tender. Now, the potatoes will probably get a little tender before our meat does, but you want to make sure that you do stew it long enough so your meat is nice and fork tender. And that'll typically take anywhere from about a half an hour up to about 45 minutes or so. And that's also why we like to use those Yukon gold potatoes or white potatoes, and we leave the skin on, because those potatoes will hold up longer and stay intact through that stewing process versus using a russet potato or Idaho potato will tend to break down. So make sure that you are using those Yukon gold or either they're called new potatoes or white potatoes. And so my potatoes are nice and fork tender. I'm looking at my stew meat, testing that as well, seeing how my stew meat is. I'm going to let this just go and cook for about maybe 5 to 10 more minutes. And as it also continues to cook, it'll also reduce down and it'll also thicken up. Well, my Chile Verde is done cooking. My rice is done, and I will share with you the recipe down below for my homemade Spanish rice. And I'll also put a link to my vlog on which I made homemade Spanish rice, and I also made homemade refried beans. My meat is nice and tender. It is looking good and it is smelling good. You see how nicely our sauce has reduced down and thickened up. This is going to be a perfect dinner. I've gone on and made us a plate with our rice. And I like to do it upright with some homemade flour tortillas. They come out so nice and so fluffy, these homemade flour tortillas. And I'll also share my recipe for my homemade flour tortillas that have been a labor of love over the decades to get them just right. And so I will share the recipe with you down below. And I'll also put a link to my vlog where I show how to make them step by step if you've ever wanted to make them. Because I didn't grow up making homemade flour tortillas in my family. We grew up making biscuits, and so the flour tortillas, making them to the level of my sister-in-laws have definitely been something that I'm so happy with. Well, this first bite's for you. I got your bite ready. Go ahead and take your bite. Now I'm going to take my bite. Oh my goodness. Y'all, this comes out so good. And let me tell you, the Chile Verde sauce, it is an excellent accompaniment to eggs in the morning for a nice breakfast with some refried beans, the sauce, your eggs, and your homemade tortillas. Some of you out there, you know what I'm talking about. Our meat is nice and tender, and our rice has come out perfectly. It is fluffy, it is full of flavor. Well, I'm going to share with you also that visual of all the ingredients that I used to make this dinner tonight. This is my oregano, my pork stew meat. Those are my hatch chilies from my hatch chili roasting event. Some cumin, the potatoes I used, that was 4 of the Yukon gold potatoes, my garlic, my onion, my tomatillos, my kosher salt, and my black pepper. And so that is it for me today. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, don't forget to show it some love, give it a thumbs up, and click share. Share this video with a friend or family. And don't forget to click that notification bell so you can come back and visit me again in my kitchen. And remember, it's always good when Devon is cooking for the family. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.